What the heck?
Okay, so we're recording now. I want to welcome everybody who is here for the live presentation and also anybody who is watching this on the replay. To begin, before I get into any of the information we're going to cover today, I wanted to just invite everybody to land in the space. And honestly, this is for me too, because as somebody who formerly suffered with like very severe social and performance anxiety for years, even though I'm like fairly balanced these days, the situational cues make me a little nervous at times. So we're all just going to take a minute here to situate ourselves in our bodies. Okay, so this is a somatic practice. So I want you just to like tune in to yourself. Notice how you're feeling. See if there's anything that your body needs right now. Maybe it's a shift in position or a stretch or a drink. And then just take a minute to gaze around your surroundings. So you're going to just look around, like maybe avoid the screen, look at the room that you're in, look around behind you. And you're not like looking at anything intently, but you're just allowing your eyes to take in. And then this is like allowing our bodies to propriocept our surroundings. A big part of the work I do in general, and also what is really helpful when it comes to topics that can be somewhat activating or triggering, is to really situate ourselves and ground ourselves in this particular moment in time. You're in your body here right now. You're in this room where you're at, and you're safe. Creating this level of safety in your being is a really wise and helpful thing to do when it comes to learning anything, because the act of intellectualizing is putting us automatically in the state of using the brain as the decision-making authority. And our brain, or this one in our head anyways, is really just based on survival, right? So grounding yourself in your body, situating yourself, helps you to be in a place to open yourself up to receive new information and potentially change the paradigm through which you're viewing everything. Because that's really what this work is all about. Okay, so today's presentation, I have taught a couple of times in different contexts. I did add a few things today. There is a lot of information, as those of you who know me know that I have a lot of information to give. I have been hyper fixated on spirituality in the realm of personal development for like better part of 15 years, really intensely for the last 5 to 7 years. And so like these are my special interests as an autistic individual. I like research this stuff for fun. So there's a lot to share. And the reason why I'm sharing this workshop in particular is because doing this work, the shadow work in general, really is, I would say, the most important underpinning when it comes to enlightenment or self-actualization. And this is rooted in a theme that I found through the various mystical traditions that I've studied. So I've spent time looking at the Hermetic Principles and like the Egyptian pantheon and like that whole rhetoric. I've spent a lot of time researching and studying the Fourth Way mystery school traditions. I'm also quite familiar with the tarot, the hero's journey archetypes, all of that, numerology, astrology, both tropical and sidereal or true sky, human design, and the gene keys. I think that's all, most of them. So anyways, in studying all of these different principles or philosophies, the common theme that I found running through a lot of these different traditions is that ultimately we're all one at the core. and we're in these human bodies intentionally with the forgetting and all of that in order to have experiences. So the information I'm going to present today, we're going to start with some of the philosophies, like where did I get this information? And then we're going to go into some practical exercises. So, oh, and that being said as well, I've been feeling called just to like get myself out there. For a long time, I was trying to market myself as a life coach and this and that. And like, I just feel like there's so much salesy pressure out there right now. And this is probably, I was thinking about this before the presentation, like, this is my shot. I'm like triggered by people who are like, I'll give you this little bit of information, but you got to pay me for the rest of it. Right. So like, that is something that I'm still unwinding in myself, because there's this paradox of like, this information is game changing. And by uncovering the themes and like putting these practices I'm going to share with you today in effect in my life, I've literally changed my life. Like it's crazy how much different things are for me and how happy I am and how balanced I am. So like I know that by sharing that, I'm like having goosebumps even as I'm sharing it because it's so powerful, right? So like I want to share this with people who can't necessarily repay me in a monetary sense, right? Like, I don't think that we should have to, I mean, this is getting into a whole other topic, but I don't think that we should have to pay to exist in our society that we like the way that we are now. And things are tough. You know, I'm a single mom, and I'm making more money than I've ever made, but like, geez Louise, like groceries and all of that kind of stuff has gone up. So I just was really feeling like I wanted to help people with this information and not really expecting like a direct exchange, in the sense that like, since I understand the singularity or the oneness of it, the entirety of our creation, I can serve in this way. I can give you all of this information that I have charged for in the past. Like I've had people pay to do this workshop in the past, where this information is also what I provide to my one-on-one clients in the containers that I operate. So I want to give it to you guys just for the sake of giving it to you, because in doing that, you all are going to be able to start implementing some of this or deepen your understanding. This is also a workshop that you can do more than once. Like I know that there's people who have signed up for this who have taken the other versions of it that I've taught, right? And so like every time we do it, we just get a little bit deeper. And in doing that, I'm opening myself up by giving. I'm opening myself up to receive in other means, and I'll be supported in doing this work. That being said, if you are somebody who has the means to donate and you feel like you want to contribute to my efforts to provide this information, there's no pressure, there's no need to, like, just open yourself up to receive. And if you feel like you want to give back at the end of, there's an email address, you can either e-transfer or PayPal, but do not take this as any sort of like, don't feel any guilt and shame if you're not in a position or you don't feel the value in them. So that being said, let's get into it. So why do we do shadow work? Okay, so as I mentioned in my little preamble, I've been studying various metaphysical mystery school traditions for a long time at a very deep and nerdy level. And the common themes that I found, as I stated, are that we're all one. And so the whole point of shadow work is accepting everything, the totality of the entirety of the possibilities, right? So like for everything, there's an opposite, like there cannot be dark without light, right? And so this little list here is a summary of the deeper, like there's a slide on each of these, the different philosophies that demonstrate why and how we are all one and why we need to do shadow work. Or I'm trying to be careful in the way that I'm describing it, like not to use definitive language in this sense, because we don't necessarily need to do, like, it doesn't need to be work. I feel like even describing it in that kind of way puts a contraction or a negative intention into it. Like, it's so hard. I gotta like accept my shadows. Like, I'm so bad at this. Like, I gotta work hard to accept myself. Like, no, it doesn't actually have to be work. Like, if you can understand experientially, or like through your primary experience, the oneness and the singularity, it doesn't have to be work. You can just accept it, right? But if you're at a point, or the other point of this too, the other side of that statement is like, not everybody's meant to wake up to this remembrance, right? Because we need just as many people to be asleep as we do awake, based on the polarity of the Hermetic Principles, right? So yeah, we don't need to do this work, but if you're inclined to do it, this is how and why. Okay, so we're going to look at the law of one, or the raw materials, to start, the Hermetic Principles, fourth way traditions, and then the final one here, the internal versus the external locus. This actually comes from my education in psychology. So before, I guess that was kind of like the gateway for me. When I was in university, I did an honor specialization in psychology and a minor in sociology and humanistic psychology, which was like what psychology started as when it was like more philosophical before it became like medicalized, essentially. So humanistic psychology was the beginning of my dip into spirituality, or like the collective unconscious, or that which lies beyond what you can see and touch and feel. But the internal versus the external locus of control is a psychological concept that I reference all of the time. Okay, so here we go. The law of one. So this book, the raw material, is a channeled message. And I don't know if anybody here has attempted to read this, but it is dense. Like there's a lot to this, but there's been a lot of different interpretations of this book. David Wilcock in particular, his show on Gaia TV, Wisdom Teachings, is primarily where I learned about this book and then started to understand it in a deeper way. And he, through that show in particular, shows a lot of how this book, which is channeled, right? And like it's difficult talking about things that are channeled to people who are very logical and analytical, because in their reality or their primary experience, it just sounds like woo, right? But like this book in particular, it totally correlates to a lot of demonstrable scientific quantum reality, quantum physics, all of these sorts of things. And so if you're interested in trying to read it, I would recommend that. Slow and steady. Don't try to like read it all at once, like digest it a little bit at a time. Or check out David Wilcock's Wisdom Teachings on Gaia TV, because he breaks it down in a little bit, like that show is also really dense, but it makes it like a little bit easier to understand. He pulls things out of it. Okay, so the point is that the core of this book, as you might be able to discern from the title, The Law of One, essentially the core transmission of this is that all is God, creator, source. And if the word God, like you'll notice on the presentation here, I spell God with a little g. It took me a long time to even use the word God, because I had such a weird upbringing with Christianity. I identified as an atheist for a long time, because I was like, this is whack. Like, what do you mean there's a dude in the sky who is watching me? And like, if I'm not good, I'm going to go to hell. Like, I just was like, no, I don't think so. Right. So it took me a long time to start using the word God in a like the reason why I use a small g is because I feel like it's like God is us, like we are God, right? So it's not like a formal term. If it doesn't, there's like no authority in it. And when I put it with the small g, but if that word is triggering for you, use whatever works for you. So when I first started in my endeavor into spirituality, I used the word universe, right? Source, creator, whatever it is, however you can express the idea that there is something beyond us that is creating all of this. There is a higher power, and even that phrase, higher power, is it a higher power? It's just the other power, right? So essentially, a law of one, put simply, is that all is God. Literally everything is an expression of the same entity in a multitude of iterations. So what that means is that everybody who's listening to this, everything and everyone that you see outside of you is also God in a different body, in order to just have the experience. Okay. Like it's not that deep. It's not that serious either. It's just experiences. Okay. And this includes experiences from the most horrific, awful experiences to the most blissful and joyous experiences. It's all part of the creation in order to have experience. Okay. So we exist in this layered reality. So there's layers to our like different dimensions to our reality. And we primarily, as humans or our society, what we're taught, we exist primarily in the lower 3 levels of that, sometimes 4, right? Depending on where you're at. Because the 3 lowest levels are the most material. Okay, so the illusion of separation refers to operating under the assumption that what you can see and touch and feel is all that there is. I am my own separate being. You are a different being than me, and I need to protect myself against you. Okay, so this is like eat or get eaten kind of vibes. Okay, so that is like one way of expressing the reason why we need to do shadow work according to the law of one. The next philosophy that I wanted to bring into the conversation today are the Hermetic Principles. So if you are a seeker, you're probably familiar with these. These principles go way back. Like the Egyptian pantheon is where I started to learn about it, like Thoth, however. I don't know how to pronounce a lot of words because I've like read them. I don't know if you can relate to like being an overachiever, like a being who like reads a lot, and so you just like pronounce things how you would read them. So, anyways, that's where the Hermetic Principles come from, and there are these 7 principles that dictate how the universe operates, basically the fabric of our reality, and how it all plays out. Okay, so I've listed all 7 of them here, but the ones that I really want to reference as far as the shadow work topic goes are number 2 and 4. Okay, so the second Hermetic principle is the idea of correspondence. Okay, so as above, so below, as within, so without. Okay, so this essentially means that everything that you see outside of yourself, your environment, your external experience, is a bigger version of what is going on internally. Okay, inside is a microcosm, outside is a macrocosm. Okay, so whatever you see, this is why I put in brackets here, the you spot it, you got it. Those of you who are in my free group on Facebook right now, the 77 Soft project, I have to keep checking myself, I have to call it a challenge, but it's a project, right? We've been playing a game called You Spot It, You Got It, right? And so the idea is like whatever you see outside of you that bothers you about other people, you actually have that internally, right? And like things that bother us outside of ourselves are clues for us for things that we are needing to integrate internally in order to become more cohesive. Okay, so everything that you see outside of you exists within, and then it works the other way around. This is the cool stuff, right? So like it's not just a matter of like having to do this work and like I need to work really hard to change. Like no, like if you just like accept that everything that you see outside of you is you, and that everything has value, then life gets so much easier. And like you can literally change your external reality by looking within and accepting everything. The other principle that is directly correlated to the topic of shadow work, in this conversation anyways, really they all kind of are, but I could probably do a whole lecture just on the Hermetic Principles. So the principle of polarity, okay, is especially relevant to this conversation, in that there's no good or bad, like value judgments about what is good or acceptable is all social conditioning or survival conditioning, right? Which is kind of social conditioning as well. But in order for the universe to operate, we have to have this concept of polarity. Like what I was saying in the preamble about like we need just as many people to be asleep as we do awake, like that is valid, right? And same thing with good and bad. Like we in our society are taught to stop ourselves from going into the negative end. Like I'll use this analogy of a pendulum to explain the polarity and like how we need to accept this, right? So there's a pendulum that's swinging, and sometimes it's going to go into the shit end of your experience. Okay. Like this is like the bad stuff, right? So if you just allow the pendulum to do its thing, like it's going to swing this way, and like the amount of depth that it has into the shit end of experience means that it's going to then have the momentum to return to the positive end, right? But in our society, we're taught to stunt that swing. We don't want the swing to go to the shit end of the experience. And the same thing with shadow work, right? So like we don't want to look at the less than ideal aspects of ourselves or the less than ideal aspects of others. We only want to attend to the good stuff, right? Because the good stuff keeps us safe, according to the illusion of separation and that lens of looking at the world, right? So by really understanding that there is no good or bad as far as value judgment goes, there's only this and that, and you need this in order to have that. Okay. So yeah, I think that's all I want to say on the Hermetic Principles. Again, I'm trying to be mindful of time and not information dumping. But if also I want to say too at this point, if you have any questions about any of this sort of stuff, just like jot a little note down for yourself, and I will have time to do some questions at the end. But it's easier for me to do it at the end than to try to break up my flow. So the other mystery school tradition, philosophy that I wanted to bring into today's conversation comes from the Fourth Way. This is a mystery school that I've spent a couple of years studying under a teacher. I started in like when the lockdowns were happening in 2020, and it's basically like an objective or behavioral system to enlightenment, really, right? It's like getting out of, it's like overriding the mind. So it's like understanding the mind and the laws of creation in order to free yourself from the constraints of the illusion of separation. Because to reiterate, the illusion of separation is when we are using the brain as the primary decision-making authority. And the brain that is in your head, we actually have three brains. So there's the brain, the heart, and your gut. Okay. And so this one that's in your head that we've been taught to idolize in our society is actually only in control of the physical and world. Okay. Your brain that's in your head, its primary objective is to make sure you eat, make sure you have babies, and you don't die. Okay. Like it's like, that's it. Okay. It's like, be aware of your surroundings, look for food, look for mating opportunities, and so forth, which is important. Okay. Like we need the brain, we need the ego to keep ourselves and our bodies in the game of the 3D world, but it is not everything. Okay. So the Fourth Way teaches a method for understanding how the brain works in order to override it or stop paying attention to it. Like use it when you need to, but then understand that you can actually get more from your reality by tuning into your heart and your gut. So and this is just one small teaching from the Fourth Way. Again, I could probably teach a whole course on the Fourth Way principles, which I probably will at some point. So the law of three is something that I talk about all the time because I find it so applicable to like everything, especially when it comes to our society. And really even actually the whole reason why I'm doing the 77 Soft project on Facebook as well is because we're taught only a third of this equation when it comes to modern society and like the systems we've been indoctrinated under. So the law of three is a law of creation, and it states for anything to come into being, there need to be three opposing forces. Okay. The first force is the active, doing, masculine, giving, contracting force. And this should sound familiar because it's the part that we've been taught. The second force is the passive, feminine, receiving, expanding force. You notice how these two things are opposite, okay? Literally all the describing words, masculine, feminine, doing, surrendering, giving, receiving, contracting, expanding. Okay, polarity. We need the active and the passive. But the third force is probably the most important, because it's the most overlooked. Like I feel like, especially in the spiritual communities or personal development, we're starting to understand the passive force or the feminine energy, the surrendering, the receiving, the drawing in. This is starting to be a bit more understood, but the neutral force is largely overlooked because it's literally nothing. It's nothing. It is blank space. It is incubating energy. Okay. It is just the space for things to grow. Right. And we're so busy doing all of the time that we make space. And it's so hard for us to do anything other than doing. Like even receiving, right, is easier than doing nothing. Right. But all three are absolutely essential when it comes to creation. And the reason that I am bringing this particular law into the conversation as far as shadow work goes is, one, to demonstrate that in order for anything to be whole, we need the polarity of the doing and the receiving, like the masculine and the feminine, right? But we also need to give ourselves space to incubate. Okay. So when it comes to receiving the information in this presentation today, don't like force yourself to try to understand it or like really work hard at it, right? Like allow yourself just to receive. And especially even with the exercises that we're going to do today, you might find some resistance or you might find it difficult to do the exercises because the brain is going to prevent you from looking at the stuff because it's vulnerable, right? So we just kind of dip our toe in, look at, like, introduce the ideas, introduce the themes and the exercises, and then we back off, right? We let it simmer, we let that it bubble in the subconscious, and with enough blank space or neutral force, you will start to like see things happening in an indirect type of way that will reinforce the work for you or the themes that are important for you. And oh yeah, and I guess before I want to have to say one final thing about the law of three. The analogy I always give to understand this is the best like conceptual way or like literal way of understanding this is conception, right? So like the law of three, for a baby to be born or created, you need the masculine sperm, the feminine egg, and then the womb is the neutral force, right? And a funny analogy I often use with the women's circles that I've been facilitating with a dear friend of mine for a few years is that like our modern society is, instead of like sperm, egg, womb, like it's just like all sperm, right? Like it's like three dicks like coming at each other, and like that nothing's getting done with that, right? Like you're not actually creating anything. Might be fun depending on who you are and what your interests are, might be entertaining, but ultimately nothing's going to be born from that, right? So that just is like kind of a funny way of remembering that we need just as much blank force and receiving force in order for anything to be done. Okay, and finally, as far as the theoretical underpinnings of today's talk, I wanted to bring the concept of the internal versus external locus of control into the conversation. So this, again, is a psychological concept as far as our perspective goes, right? So the internal versus the external locus of control has to do with where you're looking to get anything, essentially, right? Like your perspective of how you're viewing your experience. So under the illusion of separation, when we're using the brain as the primary operating mechanism, we are largely looking outside of ourselves in the external locus of control. So this means that our power and our authority is totally, and our safety, right, is totally dictated by the environment, right? We only feel safe if we have some sort of external, like wealth or, you know, something that is like tangible outside of yourself to feel safe. Also to feel good, right? So the external locus of control is why most of our society is addicted to something, right? Like whether it's a substance like alcohol, cannabis, other drugs, Food is things like that, other people, social media, all of that kind of stuff is part of the external locus, right? So it's like putting your power outside of yourself. And the internal locus is understanding like that you actually are the curator and creator of your entire experience. And so if you are missing something, or you feel like you need something, or you want something, you can create that internally, or before it shows up in the external world, you can create the feeling of it internally. And by returning to that internal locus of control, you basically become unfuckable with, right? Like you can't, I decide how I feel first inside. I don't decide how I feel based on what is happening outside of me. Okay. And the reason why this is important when it comes to the conversation on shadow work is that the reason that we have shadows in the first place, or unintegrated shadow, I should say, is because we're so fixated on the external locus of control. And this means that in particular, the safety of the tribe, right? Like we need to have we need other people to have a good opinion of us in order for us to feel safe, right? But the external locus of control is totally disempowering, and it is only adaptive when you're in a situation of like imminent danger, right? So like if you are in a physical environment where there is a very real threat to your physical safety, you want the external locus. Okay, like you want to be looking outside of yourself to make sure that you don't die, right? But in our day-to-day, like most of us, especially if you're tuning into this, you're likely in a position where you're not generally like fighting for your life on a day-to-day basis, right? And so you don't need to be looking outside of yourself for safety. And when you're doing that, all you're doing is reinforcing your disconnection from the totality of our creation, right? And so switching your locus of control from the outside to the inside creates a sense of safety and balance that then allows you to actually effectively change your reality if that's what you desire. And in the process, because the physical reality takes longer to change than the energetic, so while you're waiting, essentially, your experience becomes just so much better. Like you're so much more satisfied and just like happier in general, because like it's like the hungry ghost with the external locus, right? No matter what you do, no matter what you reach for outside of yourself, it's not actually satisfying, because the real trick is that everything comes from inside. So I think that is all that I wanted to say on that. Oh yeah, I forgot to put this slide in here. So this, I don't know if this is probably covering this up. Like it is on my view, the little people screen, but so I guess next time I'll do this, I'll switch this around, or like do something not to have it on the edge here. But I wanted to just also bring in the drama triangle into the conversation, because this is really how the internal versus the external locus is reflected in shadow work, or you spot it, you got it projection, right? So the drama triangle is a concept purely based in the external locus of control, or looking outside of yourself for safety, satisfaction, and support, right? So when we're operating in that external locus, we're either playing one of three roles. So in general, so we're either the persecutor, which is the person who is seeing everybody else's faults, or like the judge, right? Like I see what you're doing wrong, and like you shouldn't be doing this. Like I wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for you doing this, right? Like pointing out other people's problems to feel superior, essentially. Or the next position is the victim, right? So the persecutor, and this is like a polarity of like internalizing versus externalizing as well, right? So like some people are going to be more prone to externalizing their experience. Some people are going to be more prone to internalizing their experience, right? But it's all the same energy. So the victim mentality is a more internalized expression of the drama triangle, or this energy of the external locus of control. And this is just feeling like, woe is me, you know, like I could get ahead if I hadn't had this happen in my childhood. Or even I have to watch myself with victim mentality as far as like socioeconomic conditions, right? Like if I wasn't a single mom living in Canada where, you know, my cost of living has gone up 400% in the last 2 years, maybe then I would be in a better position, right? Like, and again, so like that is valid, right? Like I'm living in a situation where I'm making more money than I've ever made, and I still have just enough money to support myself and my child, right? Like, don't have a fancy life, right? And like, it's really easy for me to be like, well, if it wasn't for this, like if I could, you know, buy groceries for less than $400 a week, like it would be easier, right? But that is still putting my power outside of myself, right? And this is where we get caught up, is because we're trained to look outside of ourselves. All of our systems and everything that we've been living under teach us to look outside of ourselves. But all we're doing is perpetuating the cycle, right? Because if I believe that, then I'm going to see that and it's going to continue to happen. So instead, I can take my power back and understand that I choose how I feel no matter what is going on outside of me. So that's a victim mentality. And then the final one that I can't see, I don't know if you guys can see it here. This is the rescuer. And the rescuer is like a tricky one, because the rescuer has really good intentions typically. Like the rescuer is a person who wants to help, right? Like you can feel like often empaths or people who identify as like an empathic type of individual will be caught in a rescuer cycle, because they can see other people's pain and they want to help, right? So they put all of their energy into solving other people's problems. But the sneaky part of that is that, and not sneaky in a conscious way, again, like most people who are being the rescuer are actually really trying or like wanting to do something good. But the message that they're giving is that the person isn't capable of doing things on their own. And so they're like, oh, poor you, like I will help you. And also in the process of doing that, they're not focused on themselves, right? Like they're not looking at themselves. And this is another kind of point that I don't know if I put it on any of the slides, but a big part of shadow work or befriending the darkness is understanding that we're all here on our own journey. Like we're all living individual realities. Okay, we all have different experiences of whatever's happening based on our completely unique blueprint of predispositions and previous experiences. So what another person's doing is really none of your business. Okay, like even if it's affecting you, right? It's not really about you, it's about them. So we have to learn, and again, definitive language, like if you would like to become enlightened and live a more neutral and balanced existence, it's important to allow others to do what they're going to do, right? Let people play their game out. Let people have the experiences that they're meant to have. It's none of your freaking business what people are doing, okay? Even if they're making the worst decisions, in your opinion, it's the decision that they are making, and you cannot understand why they're making that unless you are that person, okay? So we need to just let people be, let people make mistakes, let people go down the path, because again, to revisit the law of one and this idea of the interconnectedness of humanity and ultimately the singularity, is that there are a multitude of different circumstances and paths playing out. And for things to happen, right? Like I get this vision of like, I don't know if you guys, I'm probably dating myself because I'm kind of old, but like I had this toy when I was a kid that was like a pegboard with like wheels that you could put on it, right? Like there's different cogs, and like we had a handle on this one and a handle, or like a result down here, right? So you put all these different pegs on and like you spin the wheel, and like this one goes this way and this one goes this way and this one goes this way. And like, and it all, you can't, it's not like orderly, right? And you can't really predict it. So in order for you to get your end results, you got to go forwards and you got to go backwards. You got to go forwards and backwards, right? So you don't know that another person making the worst decisions that you could possibly make, in your opinion, you don't know how that's eventually going to affect and it like will play out in a good way, right? Because remember, there's no good or bad, there just is. Let me just, I think I got it. Sometimes I go like, this is the difficulty of me teaching things in order, is that I get on tangents. Oh yeah. Okay. And I guess it's important to say, again, reinforce the reason why the external locus of control is so intoxicating or predominant in our society is because when we are in a state of not feeling safe, which most of us are, because the societal conditions that we're living in are fear mongering us and poisoning us in a multitude of ways. So when we're not feeling safe in our bodies, we have to look outside of ourselves. Like it's like an overpowering urge, right? And we do need that sometimes, but we're meant to be living in experiences where that's only like a small portion of the time, right? So in order to remove yourself, like extricate yourself from the external locus of control and switch to the internal, you got to get vulnerable. Okay. It's vulnerable to focus internally instead of looking outside of yourself. And so if this is feeling like impossible for you at this point, slow and steady wins the race, right? Like at the end, I've got some actionable items. And if you're somebody who's been in my orbit for some time, none of this should be new. It's basically practice, slow and steady. Nervous system needs time to adapt, right? And the more that you do it, the easier it gets. Okay, so in sum, from all of the philosophical information, okay, essentially the common threads are as such. To start, all is one. We're all derived from the source, creator, God, and we are given this illusion of separation or the forgetting of the fact that we are all one in order to have a multitude of experiences, right? Like being a human and being in this body is a freaking gift. It is a blessing. There are so many souls wanting a body because you can't touch anything when you're a light being, okay? You cannot feel anything. You cannot eat the food. You cannot absorb the sunlight. You cannot have the tactile experiences of a close friend or a lover. Like all of these things, oh, it's like chill. I get so like emotional when I think about these things. I like just like being a human, okay? Like it is a gift. We are here in these bodies intentionally to have these experiences, and the objective is to remember the interconnected nature so that you are this and that. You are not just a physical being. You are not just a spiritual being. You are somewhere in the middle. You are a magical being in a body that has access to the material and the spiritual, okay? So getting to this point involves accepting the objective reality that there is no good or bad. Okay. There's nobody who decides what's right or wrong. You decide what is right or wrong for you in that particular moment. And what you decide is right one day might be wrong the next day. Okay. There's no static rules about what is good or bad. There is only this and that, and things that move you either toward a more expansive or interconnected experience or a more contracted and separate experience. And both have value. Both of those have value. And I know this is really common in the seeker community or spirituality, New Age spirituality in particular, because that's actually just Luciferian. That's a topic for another day. Disembodiment, right? Like disembodied spiritual teachings teach us to only strive for interconnected expansion, right? Like you're like love and light only. You know, I'm only here for the good. I'm only here to be a light being. Like, fuck that. You're still a human, okay? Like you're here in a body to have the human experiences that you're having. And sometimes that means contraction or separateness, okay? So there's no good or bad, there just is. There's this and that. One takes you this way, one takes you that way. Same decision, two different people could lead one person to expansion and one person to contraction. Okay, this is why there's no common set of rules or code of conduct that are appropriate for everybody, because it's all individual based on a particular moment. Okay, so acceptance of this in an experiential way. Okay, so saying this like intellectually, you've probably, this is not a new idea. It's not my idea. I didn't come up with this. These ideas that I'm expressing here are based off of threads that I've found in the collective unconscious and all these different mystery schools, right? but you can like understand it potentially on an intellectual level. But there's a difference between understanding that in your brain intellectually, like I've heard these words before, yes, the theory, and experiencing it from your own primary perspective. Okay. So I am passionate about these topics and I'm sharing this information in this way because I have personally felt the interconnected nature of humanity. I've developed a personal relationship with the divinity within me via a number of practices and space making over the last few years. And so I know personally this to be true. And so if you're not there, that's okay, right? This is why at the beginning I gave that pre-frame, or why when I was talking about the law of three, I was talking about let the shit simmer. Okay. Like if this is you're feeling resistance to these concepts, you've got to focus on your meditative practice and making more space in your being in order to let it sink in on a cellular level. Okay. Oh yeah. Like, what is this one? Acceptance. Right. Yes. And again, reiterating the fact that safety comes from inside first, and then we will see it outside. And then really highlighting in bold and caps here, we are everything and nothing concurrently. Basically, our existence is a giant paradox. Okay, so let's get into some of the exercises. Now, I've had some issues with presentations in the past of like trying to share sound and do like a little somatic exercise here. So, and then also trying to be cognizant of time. Oh yeah, already in like almost an hour. So if you we're going to just go into the exercises here is what I'm saying. But if you're watching this on the replay, or if you want to revisit those of you who are here live right now, I would recommend doing some sort of somatic, either breath work, or like one of my favorite things to do is literally just like shake my body. Oh, I've got like tendonitis in my elbow, so I can't shake it that much. But like we've been doing a lot of like focused brain stuff, right? So like kind of shaking your body to pull that tension out will allow you to have greater cognitive capacity for the exercises that we're going to do. So I am going to, I think, so where we're at, I'll give you guys a few minutes here to think about these questions. Okay, so in your notebook, write down a list of the people that bother you the most. So who are your greatest karmic relationships? And it can either be a specific person, like if you've got, like a lot of us have that family member, you know, or like if there's a particular coworker or like a boss or something like that that really gets grinds your gears, so to speak. Or it can also be less specific and more like a type of person. So make a list of the people that bother you the most, and then like a little bit of like qualitative information as far as why they bother you and the traits in particular. So I'm just going to give you guys a couple of minutes here to do this while I drink some water and take some breaths. Actually, maybe I will stand up. I'm just going to shake myself off camera here while you guys do this. Okay. So we're getting kind of like, I want to wrap this up in about 90 minutes in total and leave some time for questions at the end. So I'm going to kind of stop that exercise there. But again, to reiterate, do this work in waves, right? So like maybe think about like keeping a running list in your journal or your phone, like whenever somebody bothers you or you find yourself thinking something negative about another type of person, and like just hold that list. Okay. So the point of this exercise has to do with the idea of, one, the external locus of control and a lot of the philosophical conversation that we've had up to this point. And also the idea of parts work as well. Okay, so parts work is a concept. The words parts work I got from Teal Swan, but it's essentially the idea of like integrating fragmented aspects of ourselves. So again, remembering all is one, the singularity dictates that we're all the same being having a multitude of experience. There's no good or bad, there's just differences. Okay, so the people, as far as the exercise we just did, I kind of wrote this in a different order, but essentially whenever we are activated or triggered by another person's behavior, it is actually an indication of a non-acceptance or non-accepting aspects of ourself that exist, right? And so we either directly have these traits and we don't want to look at them or make them vulnerable, or we are so vigilant in not being these traits that we've identified or we've created a whole aspect of ourselves that protects us internally. Like there's an internal judge that keeps ourselves in control. So like one of the things that has come up in past workshops, and actually some of the, so I got some feedback, different ideas about things that bother people in the group that I'm doing. And like a kind of an easy one is like people being late, right? Like people who are behind a schedule often. Usually, like, and I find this to be a polarity, right? Like there's usually people who are very much like early and in control, or there's people who are really late, right? So and they tend to have a disdain for the other type, right? So like people who are, or another thing that has come up is like alcoholics, right? Like if you grew up with an alcoholic or drug addicted parent who is just chaotic, a lot of times the children go the opposite direction, right? So they're like, I will never be that, like that is bad, I will never be that. And so they create an internal judge or persecutor to mirror that behavior that they don't want to be. But what they're doing is they're fragmenting themselves, right? Because we all are everything. We have all of those predispositions and potential within us. They only express based on a multitude of different variables. Okay, so so when we look at another person, the spot it, you got it game is essentially like a trail of clues for us to look at either things that we are doing or we do in a covert type of way and we are trying to hide it because we don't want to be vulnerable, or we're looking for, like, if that's not the case, like if you really are not that, according to your viewpoint, right, you are then being so rigid against the fact that that is like an essential part of creation that you are fragmenting yourself and causing soul loss. So you're casting a part of yourself away because you've deemed it to be not valuable or bad. Okay. This topic also relates to like the idea of parts work and fragmentation. Can also come from when we face criticism, right? So like a lot of times the reason why we have these fragmented aspects of our soul and why we feel like we need to be doing shadow work is because we have faced criticism from the environment, right? So like as a child, if you are told not to do something, for me, I was really loud and like weird. So like I was often told to be less, right? Like tone it down. And like stop saying weird things. So and that is, it's funny even looking back through the lens of like undiagnosed autism too. Like I was fucking weird, right? So like I faced a lot of I received a lot of feedback from my environment at an early age that the way that I was naturally was not okay, right? I was cast out of the tribe, so to speak. I was socially outcast because of these aspects of myself that were deemed by the group, the external locus of control. They were deemed by the group to be not acceptable. And so then there's an aspect of my internal experience that breaks off and becomes a mirror of that which is criticizing me, right? So like internally, I have my grouchy old stepdad who like body shamed me as a child, right? Like there's an element that mirrors him, or my paternal grandmother who fat shamed me as a child, right? So while she was like 300 pounds. So there's like internal grandma that's like, don't eat that, you're a piece of shit, right? Like every time I want to eat a cupcake. Okay. Or there's like the children that made fun of me in school because I was so weird. And oh man, it's coming back now as I'm saying it. So it's like, this is the fun thing about this work, right? Like time isn't linear either. Like time is actually just the space between matter. So when you think about these things, like I feel like I'm gonna cry right now because I really actually probably when I'm done this, I'll do a minute of going back, like take an aspect of myself and go back to little Jenn in public school who was picked on because she was so weird, right? And like because I was gifted and put into a special program in school, I got so much flack for being smart, right? They're like, oh, you're brown noser, like you're over. And I'm literally just existing as a child, right? Like just being myself. And there's like school children who are like, don't be such an overachiever. Like, why are you so smart? Right. So then there's an element of me internally that fragments. Okay. There's an internal group of children who are telling me that it's bad to be an overachiever and that I need to not try so hard and that I got to be less smart and that when I use big words, it scares people, right? Like, or like maybe even like saying that is a little judgy, but like, like there's like using big, if when I speak in the fullness of my intelligence and demonstrate how smart I am, that people don't like me. Okay. So then there's like there's all of these, we have so many of these little fragments inside of ourselves that are developed as protection mechanisms. This is a coping mechanism in order to create safety. Okay. And it's all a mechanism of the external locus of control. Right. But if we internalize that, so then we end up with all these fragmented aspects of ourselves. There's all these like judges and persecutors internally that are kind of guiding our behavior or like telling us to not be certain things. And then there are the aspects of ourselves that have been fragmented and cast out. Okay. And so we're split. And this means that our power is diminished. Okay. And when we're diminished in this way, it's really difficult to be empowered and to feel balanced. Right. So part of the practical work when it comes to this, and again, this is probably beyond the scope of a 90-minute presentation, but part of the reason why I'm doing this work is because I am in the process of coming back online and developing my own wisdom school. So if you are resonating with the things that I'm saying, definitely make sure that you stay in touch and in the loop as far as when I start teaching more things like this. But basically, we want to go through the process of identifying all these different triggers, right? Like, who is it that has been criticizing you? What were you criticized for? And how can you call that piece of yourself home? Right? How can you make that piece whole again? Right? And so this applies both to those internalized aspects of ourselves that we have fragmented from a place of security and safety, and also the fragmented aspects of ourselves, which are actually projections onto others, right? So that which we see in another that we hate, that we cannot get down with, the people who are doing the worst things in the world, they're you too. They're you two in a different body, right? And so that part's a little harder, right? So like we have to accept and call all of these pieces of ourselves home in order to be in our most power, essentially, to be able to be the most powerful, be the most balanced, feel the most safe and complete and whole. And so then we can really rein in our power as human beings, as mystical and material. Okay. So now that we've looked at the external, the things that we're projecting onto others. Exercise number 2 has to do with the things that we don't like about ourselves. And this is kind of related to the little spiel that I just did about the fragmented aspects of ourselves. So again, for time's sake, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but I encourage you to revisit this if you're on the live call. And I'll send the well, you'll get a replay of this, so you can just pause it. I might actually send the slides too, since some of them are kind of cut off, so that you can look at the list. So I'm gonna read through this. Oh, some of it is cut off, but we'll see if I can remember what some of them say. I'm gonna read through this list, and I want you to write down what words are things that you say about yourself. Like, what do you see in yourself as far as your shadow traits? And also what words you really don't see in yourself, or words that create contraction in your being when I say them. Okay, so tune into how your body is feeling right now. Maybe take a minute to like look around your room and situate yourself again, because we've been in the mind a lot. Okay, get a kind of baseline of where you're at and how your body's feeling. And I'm going to read through this list. So again, making a note of anything that you definitely have said about yourself or feel about yourself, but you're feeling sensitive about or vulnerable about, or words that are just really not you, or that you really can't see yourself being. Egotistical, lazy, sloppy, unkempt, manipulative, materialistic, neurotic. I don't know what that one is. Weird. Careless, cowardly, two-faced, boring, cynical, angry. I wonder if I can I move this? Oh, I can move it. I'll do this. Okay. But I can see it. There we go. Oh, controlling was the one I missed. Angry, bitchy, unworthy, clingy, needy, childish, annoying, untrustworthy, unstable, gossipy, flaky, vain, stupid, spoiled, entitled, miserly. Just another way of saying grouchy, stubborn, self-destructive, depressing, devious, jealous. You know, add sneaky. Did I put sneaky in there? No. Vindictive, oversensitive, nervous, nosy, paranoid, perfectionist, pretentious, melodramatic, know-it-all, elitist, snobby, irrational, cruel, impulsive, insecure, dishonest, unattractive, fat, and skinny for the polarity. So it's funny reading this list personally, because so this was like when I first started doing shadow work, like 2017-ish, like it was really difficult to embody a lot of these words, because it brings it brings a lot of criticism back, right? Like a lot of these words are things that people have said about me. And I really like suffered a lot as a result of feeling like I was these things and that they were bad. And it's kind of funny now reading the list again from the place that I'm at now. Like it's been a bit, I think I haven't taught this course in about a year now. And I kind of giggle, like the words that were the most triggering. I'm like, yeah, I am that. Like I can be really impulsive. I can be insecure. I actually in my group, I'm going to be sharing some of the body image issues that I've been experiencing lately as a result of fluctuations in my fat potential my fat content, my body composition. So some of the words I'm like giggling because I'm like, yeah, I am that, it's fine. And some of them I'm like, oh, I'm still challenged by that word. So you'll see the things evolve in yourself, but ultimately the exercise with this is to be able to like not be activated eventually by anything, right? Because again, to reiterate, we are all everything. We all have the capacity to be all of these things to given different contexts, right? And if you feel like you're not any of these things, it just means you haven't had the context or the specific situations and layers of situations that create behaviors in yourself. So you just haven't had the opportunity to have that particular trait express in yourself. So on that note, so that list basically, like anything that you can see in yourself and you feel as like as a negative trait, or like it's something that's familiar that other people have said about you. The conversation, the slide that I had on the fragmentation and the parts work and calling those pieces of yourself home would be especially applicable. And then anything that you were like, I'm absolutely not that, that involves the idea of the projection, right? So again, so it's the internal versus the external. So looking at accepting those aspects of yourself that you want to push away, and also what you see in other people. So I wanted to include this little slide, similar kind of topic, but more focused on the negative things that we believe about ourselves, less about the things that we receive from our environment as negative. And a lot of these can be internalized based on societal or external conditions, but especially when it comes to negative thoughts about ourselves and body image. Predominantly a lot of the women, or a lot of the people in my orbit are women. There are some men, hello to the men observing this, and it does affect men as well. Like it's not just like strictly a feminine phenomena, but just the way that we've been conditioned, the women tend to feel worse about their bodies than men. There's kind of a double standard with that, right? But body image in particular, like whenever you think something that not good about yourself, or you think that there's something that is not acceptable about yourself, whether it's a trait, like a personality trait, or a physical aspect of yourself, essentially a piece of yourself fragments, and that soul that you're again fragmented and your soul has lost a piece of itself, right? So an exercise that you can do, like to bring into your conscious awareness, is to be the conscious observer of how you're thinking about yourself, in particular about your body, right? So like when I look at myself in the mirror, there's certain parts of my body that when I look at it, it doesn't feel nice. Like I'm like, ooh, like that is just not what I wish it was, but it's what it is, right? And so it's still, even with the years of work that I've been doing on this, it's still a conscious effort in order for me to pull those aspects of myself back, right? So yeah, you can use that as an exercise as well, as just like watching how you're talking about yourself, and asking yourself, like, as far as the traits, I think that actually is the next one. The traits, like, how is it a good thing? And then with the body image, like literally sending love to that part of your body, right? Like, I love you body, thank you body. And then like reinforcing that how you feel comes from inside and it's not determined by external stimuli. All right. Oh yeah, this is the slide that I was just talking about basically. So what do we do with this information? Okay. So looking at the list of shadow traits that I listed off, and or the, oh no, I created a different slide for that one. So just specifically with the list of shadow traits that we just went through, part of this exercise, or like this process of accepting the totality of everything, is understanding that even the worst traits can be good in some way, in the sense that good is adaptive, right? It leads to our survival and our expansion. So like, to use a practical example, being manipulative was something that I received a lot of feedback as being when I was younger. And being manipulative was something that obviously is seen as a negative, because it's seen as like dastardly. You're like, I'm trying to like control people to like, you know, dominate them or whatever. But it is good in the sense that it's literally the same energy as charisma, right? So the same energy that gives you manipulation when you're operating under the illusion of separation, which we all are initially, especially when we're in a state of survival. The same energy of being able to manipulate somebody with the intent of defending or attacking, right? That's the illusion of separation, gives me the ability of charisma, or connecting people, and being able to present information in a way because I'm able to like schmooze them essentially, right? So it's all a variation of your frequency and the intention behind it, right? So if I'm using this energy of charisma from a place of contraction, or trying to remove somebody else's free will, or like override somebody's free will in order to increase my experience, that's manipulation. Also still understandable in certain circumstances. If I'm operating though from a place of being more spacious and understanding the interconnected nature of humanity, it is expressed as charisma, right? So we can take all of those different traits, even things like being insecure, right? Like insecurity can keep you safe, right? Like that's how that is good. Like when you're insecure, you remove yourself. You're like pulling yourself out of situations, which, if you know, like adaptively, we want to be able to move into these things. But in that particular context, it's a good thing because it promotes your safety in that moment, right? So looking at your list of items, there may be certain ones that like it's hard to see how they're good. So in that case, you want to just shoot for like understanding it from a place of acceptance or neutrality. We're always just doing the best that we can with what we've been given in every given circumstance. Like I can look back at some of the decisions that I made when I was an alcoholic and a drug addict, which I was for decades. Okay. And we're talking like heavy use of a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol, right? Like undiagnosed autism and ADHD, over and under stimulated, like constantly alcohol, stimulants, or downer sometimes, right? Like in that state, I was really disembodied, and I did a lot of things that were like really, like looking back, like I would not make those decisions now, right? But when I was in that place, I was still worthy of love and trust, and I was ultimately innocent in the eyes of God or creator source, right? I was still innocent because I was doing the best that I could with what I had, right? Even though the things that I was doing were hurting other people and myself, I was still operating from a place that was worthy of love and acceptance, right? And the more that I beat myself up about it, like when I was in that state or even afterwards, right? Like I had so much guilt and shame about things that I had done from a place of being in that disembodied survival state, that the guilt and the shame just led me towards more contraction, right? So this is why acceptance of these things, accepting that you have always been doing the best that you can with whatever you had given to you at that point in time. And then, so we also, if we're applying this to ourselves, we also have to apply it to the other. Okay, so every single human being on the face of the earth in this realm is doing the best that they can with what they've been given. And that might be a difficult pill to swallow, which I think we'll go into the next slide here, because we're looking at other people in this study, right? So like every single person, again, I'm reinforcing this because it's very important. Every single human being is worthy of love and is innocent ultimately at their core, even if they have committed atrocities, even if they are a serial offender, even if they are somebody who is operating under the illusion of separation and dominating others, taking away the free will of others to promote themselves and their materialistic gains and their whatever it is, right? You do not know what that person has gone through. You don't know what environment they were raised in. You don't know the generational karma that they have inherited. They are making decisions based off of what is best for them in every given moment. And it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, right? People are born into different situations with different predispositions. They have to make certain decisions that you would not make in your case, right? Because you have not had the same experiences that they have, right? So like, we're always doing the best that we can with what we've been given, even if the best that we can do is terrible. Okay, because like, who's deciding what's good or bad? Is there a good or bad? No, there is no good or bad. There just is. Okay, so this is the part, like, I find it's almost easier for us to forgive ourselves and like look at ourselves and have softness for ourselves than it is for the other. And I think that this is because of the external locus of control and how prevalent it is in our society, and also how a lot of the systems that we've been raised under are very divisive, right? It's like, you know, making us more concerned, like we're either the rescuer or the persecutor with how other people are living their lives and the mistakes that they're making and the injustices that are being created as a result of other people's decisions, that we're messing everything up. Basically, we're taking ourselves out of our first player, like main character energy and our own experience, and we're just like wrapping ourselves up in another person's experience, right? Like the people who are doing terrible things in the world are just on a process. They're just playing out that specific potential. They're just playing out that specific potential. We need bad things to happen in the world. We need people for us to be triggered by. Like we need situations of criticism and injustice and all sorts of tragedies and negative events. We need those things to happen. Okay, those things that are happening outside of ourselves are fuel for us to have more experiences. And when you can pull yourself out of the value judgment or external locus of control and see things from a more neutral standpoint, you can really have value in every experience. Okay, so the exercise, so understanding this, okay, so I'm saying these words and like you're hearing them intellectually, that's level one, right? Embodying this on a cellular level takes practice and space making, the law of three. We need to incubate these concepts from a place of spaciousness in order to be able to experience them in a firsthand, okay? So when it comes to the exercise about projection, exercise number one, can we look at that list of people and see, like, put ourselves in those shoes, right? Like, can you see how somebody on your list that you really don't like is acting from either a place of self-preservation or ultimately innocence? Can you see how you could potentially be them or how you are like them sometimes? And I don't know, I think from here, this is where I wanted to do. Like if I go forward, backwards. Oops, no, it just went back. How do I go back? Oh, how do I make it go backwards? Okay, well, now we're on the last screen and I can't figure it out. So we're gonna do some Q&A right now. So anybody who's on the call live right now, I think I can see everybody. If you have either some personal traits about yourself that you want to share that you're having a hard time integrating, or like if you're finding some resistance to anything that I've said as far as like the exercise with the other people, just like put your camera on and raise your hand, or just like start talking and you should take the screen. Or if nobody has questions. Yvonne, yes. I don't know if you're muted. No, you're not. There you go.
Oh, I just figured out how to raise my hand.
Yay.
Okay, cool. The question I had is when you did the list of traits, you said about yours being manipulative and charisma is the opposite. So is that what you look for, is kind of the opposite to find the good?
Totally. Yeah. That is a way to frame it, right? So it's like, and that philosophy kind of comes from the gene keys, like the way that I view things, as like the same energy can either be detrimental or positive, based on your frequency. Yeah. So like looking at it from that end can definitely be helpful. But I do also, I'm glad that you brought that up, because even framing it that way can be potentially problematic, in the sense that like, it's not always about making things better. Sometimes I'm manipulative because I'm sneaky and I'm trying to like, I'm trying to, get myself out of the hot seat. When sometimes I lie, right? Like sometimes I lie way less now because it's part of fourth way to like, not even white lies like affect us, right? But like sometimes I'm insecure in a way that is really damaging to my relationships. Sometimes I like, one of the big things I've been thinking about shadow work a lot lately, like what activates me, and like I'm largely compassionate and able to see the best in everything at this point, but like people who don't know how to drive, like I drive around the city all the time with the cleaning business, and like I'm constantly like, come on bro, like can you right? So there's a piece of me that thinks everybody's stupid. Okay, there's a piece of me that thinks I'm way smarter than everybody, and like the world would be way better if people were less dumb, right? Like, so it's like not always about making it better. Like sometimes it sucks, and that's okay, right? Because it's not all good. There's just as much bad. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I wanted to make some observations
Yes,
aloud, if that's okay.
for sure.
Annette Sullivan, Nadijda, Detroit Muskrat, Mady, Nadunjaba, Makwa Dodam, Niendel. When I'm the spirit, that's Meskinsiong for. So I'm First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. And I had some difficulty interpreting some of the information as it was written down, but I have to say that a lot of it is very similar to our Indigenous teachings.
Amazing.
If I can share.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Yeah, I was making notes, especially at the beginning. So we have no separation between us and spirit. And we say that there's no distance between us and spirit, which means we're connected to all things, as you discussed.
Yes.
And we say that spirit is in everything. So that's another layer there for the beginning teachings, and that we are all related.
Beautiful. So
there's that no separation. You can go even further to say we're all related to each other, and also the animal and plant beings, and our spirit helpers and guides in the whole kit and caboodle. And we say in order to get focused, I'm going to say this in a good way, that we move from the head to the heart and go within.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where
amazing.
You really start to figure things out,
Yeah.
So it's exactly pretty much the same as, going from the, external focus to internal focus. So that was correlated. And that we also say, again, these are just the teachings I've received, and there's many in Indigenous thought. So I just wanted to put that out there because I don't want somebody messaging saying, oh, la, 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 right?
Right, yes.
We do it this way or that way. There's many different ways, right? And we say that silence is a space for learning. And we can,
Beautiful.
when we're silent, we're observing, right? So the silence allows for observation. And we say that we learn from the external, like the natural world. So we learn from the external world.
Yes.
So we have to go there. We have to be silent and watch the external to learn how to change the internal or interpret the internal. So I mean, talk about overlap.
Right? That is wild.
Yeah,
I
so
love that.
So I read between the lines because there's some of the stuff that was way out there for me. Woohoo, like the words, big
Right,
word
yes.
alert. But it all came down to this. And even when you talked about the masculine and feminine and the neutral space for the conception, we believe that grandmother moon and grandfather sun have a hand in, they assist with conception.
Huh.
You know, in the womb or with the family. So the family could be the neutrality or, you know, the womb, like you'd said. So yeah, I just wanted to say that and share that. And in case, you know, it adds another layer of to everything you said of you know, of equality, right?
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate the insights and like the shared wisdom there. Like, and it really, I feel like that is such like a beautiful example of how there's so many different ways to get to the same thing, right? Like the words that
Indeed.
I'm using are based off of totally unrelated systems. But this message is the same thing. Like it's ultimately the same. So it just different ways like resonate with different people. And now I'm like gonna have to look into indigenous teachings because I obviously need to learn more about that. Like that sounds really intriguing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I got this link from a mutual friend, I think of yours and mine. You can email me. You've got
Okay,
my email.
beautiful.
And you know, maybe the three of us can connect and share some a few good laughs and some info.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Amazing. Anybody else have any input or questions or like a practical case example, case study? I want to also say, just because we're kind of at the end, like I'll be on here for a few more minutes, but I got to go pick my kid up in a short period of time. So I'll have to cut it here soon. But if there's anything that has come up from the workshop and or like case studies that you want to share in a more anonymous format, the group that you can see on here that I'm running right now, it's free on Facebook. It's a private group called 77 Soft. If you're connected with me on social media, like it's on like the link in my Instagram bio, you can click it to join the group. Or if you just search it, it's probably the only thing that's listed with that. But you can share, like that group is basically an open forum to share all this sort of stuff. And you can post anonymously or like, maybe you can post anonymously. We've had some tech issues with trying to figure that out, but you can post in there if you want to do it in a more anonymous, or if you want to take some time to think about what you want to share and put it in there, and then I'll respond in that way as well. So does anybody else have any comments or anything, any examples they want to bring up before we end today? Okay, no. So I don't know. I don't know how to go back. There is a screen, like one last thing that I want to share. Maybe because I can't figure out how to get backwards in this presentation, I'll like copy this. I'm going to send anybody who got the link is on the email list. So I'll send a summary of the action items. So we talked a lot about intellectual and kind of spiritual etheric concepts today. And a big part of the work, or like the way that I've been able to take this information and actually elicit changes in my experience, is through practices. Okay, so like how it's good to know this stuff, but like how do we work it? How do we make it work? Okay, like if you are someone who is stuck in the illusion of separation or like in that external locus of control, the main thing that is going to help you to be able to switch to the internal locus and be able to view the world like life is school, like be able to see things happening outside of you as just a lesson or something for you to learn from. That means that you have to create safety in your body. Okay. So the first step with that is being mindful of what you are putting into and on it. Okay. Like watching what you're eating, being mindful of the sources of the food that you're ingesting, trying to eat whole foods, trying to eat animals that are happy, right? If you're somebody who eats animals, like trying to like pay respect, like find places that actually respect the animals. Cause I do think we're supposed to be omnivores. And again, there's some differentiation. I should be even careful with how I'm saying this, right? Some people don't want to eat animals and that's fine. Some people want to eat animals, that's also fine. Right? But if you're somebody who wants to eat animals, trying to choose animals that are happy and have been created, like treated with respect during their life, will help you to not absorb the anxiety and the fear that those animals were raised under. Also, I feel like most people here are in North America, and both Canada and the United States are just full, like our food is like full of chemicals. Like there's so much preservatives, dyes, sugar, salts, all these sorts of things, right? And it can be overwhelming to try to get away from and expensive, like it can be limiting financially, but trying to choose more natural foods, less processed foods, avoiding substances like alcohol and drugs obviously will help to keep your body a little bit more calm. And then also products and like into and on, right? So like what you're ingesting, and then like the products that you're using, like a lot of our beauty products, cleaning products, things like that also have like low doses of neurotoxins in them. So trying to like gradually switch your stuff over to more natural products will help to reduce the static load in your being, because it's when your body is poisoned, you can't stop the brain from looking for a threat. Okay. Because the threat is coming from inside of you. Your body is under attack by all these different chemicals. And so your body is under attack and it's telling the brain that something's wrong, and the brain is looking outside of itself to make sure that there's nothing that's going to attack it. Right. So this is where, and I'm always really cautious with when I'm talking about this topic in particular, because when I first started becoming aware of this, I went totally neurotic. Like was like afraid of everything. Like, you know, like I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. And like, that's not better. Okay. Like, because that's contraction, right? So it's like a nice balance of discernment and like making good choices when you can, and accepting when you can't make a good choice, right? Because it's your perception is an important aspect of this. So there's that, what you're putting into and on your body. The other thing that will help you to be able to create a baseline of safety in your body so that you can open yourself up to a new perspective intellectually is grounding. Okay. Touching the earth. It's really simple, but we don't do it enough, right? Like we are electromagnetic beings. We are connected to our environment. The environment is us too, right? So touch the earth, get into a natural body of water, get the sun on your skin. I'm like so thankful. It's I live in southwestern Ontario. It's like summertime here, and I live in between two Great Lakes. And so yesterday I was in Lake Huron and I feel supercharged, right? So like anywhere that water is flowing naturally removes negative ions off your being. Okay, so sit near a river, sit near a lake, anything like that can help pull those negative ions off. So grounding. And then the third recommendation I'm going to make, I'm trying to remember what was on the list. It's like a third recommendation I'm going to make is to develop a devotional practice. Okay. So practice makes progress. Devotional practice is essentially meditation. Okay. And it doesn't have to look like sitting in an ashram, like, you know, giving up all of your beings and like being completely still. It doesn't have to be like that. Presence is meditation. Okay. Wherever you are fully present in the moment, that is a meditation. You can meditate when you're doing the dishes. You can meditate when you're folding laundry, right? Like you can meditate when you're cleaning your house. It's harder to meditate like in public, but you can. I was doing it on the beach yesterday, right? Like, so anything that you can do to pull your attention into the present moment. I got a set of protocols from Bentino Massaro. Like, oh, I didn't see if there's chats. Hold on a second. Does it show me? I don't know. Like I see thing. Oh, okay. Oh, there's people. Okay, cool. Sorry. Anyways, distraction. So devotional practice, meditation, focusing internally, right? So Bentino Massaro is a great creator that I love his content, and he suggests 3 levels of meditation to practice. So 2 to 5 seconds every 2 to 5 times an hour. Okay, so 2 seconds. You can do 2 seconds where you take your attention and you focus it on your heart. 2 seconds, easy peasy. But you do that, if you do that 2 to 5 times an hour, that pulls you into that internal landscape. And then in the morning and before you go to bed, so right when you wake up and right before you go to sleep, you can literally do it when you're laying in bed. Just take your attention inside and do a body scan, right? Or call in the directions. There's a lot of different things that you could do. Say hello to the creator, say thank you, right? 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes when you wake up and when you go to sleep. And then once a week, if you can fit in a larger session, like 30 to 90 minutes, if you do those 3 levels with regularity, you will switch your focus from the external locus to the internal, because it's just practice, right? The brain likes what is familiar. And so right now, like for most people, the external is what's familiar, right? So if you can switch it, the internal becomes familiar. And I've been doing this for a few years now. And meditation is like easy now. Like it was so hard. I was neurotic as fuck, like could not meditate. And now I crave it, right? So you just have to keep with it. Just keep doing it. And that's about that. So creating safety in your body. I'll send a list of the actionable items because I feel like there's something else I'm missing from that, but I'm done talking, I think now. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate everybody who attended live, everybody who's watching this on the replay. If you're looking for more support, as I've mentioned, I'm doing a free group right now. We're almost halfway through. I'm doing 77 days of self-love. And so we're at like day 36 right now. So if you want to join, but the group will be continuing after that. I just won't probably be posting every day like I have been. So there's that. That's absolutely free. You can also follow me on my social medias, which are listed here. Or if you're looking for more personalized support, I do have a deal going on right now for one-on-one sessions. And so you can send me a message and we can discuss that. And just a reminder, if you felt like you got value from this and you want to help contribute to my financial aid, feel free to send me a donation, but do not feel any pressure to at all. This information and the time spent today is my gift from me to you. So thank you so much, everybody. And I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day.